Hello, and welcome to the Crane Bag Podcast. I am Jay Leeming. I envision a world in which live storytelling is a part of every community, in which people are empowered to use their own voices and imaginations to tell the myths, epics, and wonder tales which have nourished humans for thousands of years. These traditional stories are some of the most radical tools we have with which to change our consciousness, to connect us to the earth, the sacred, and each other, and to transform both ourselves and the world around us. They are some of the most democratic and fundamentally ecological thinking tools that we have. If you are inspired by this vision, I invite you to join my Patreon community either as a free or a paying member. By doing so, you not only support my own work, but also make it possible for me to share these stories with others at no cost. And you'll also receive regular writings, podcasts, and invitations to explore your own imaginative powers through online events. You can join my Patreon community at patreon.com/storyjl. Thank you. Well, there once was a princess named Draupadi who was born from a fire. How it happened was this. Her father was a king, and he had an arch-enemy named Drona, who he wished to kill, of course. So he consulted his Brahmins and asked them how they could make it possible for his wife, the queen, to give birth to a warrior boy who would grow up to be a warrior man who would one day kill Drona. Well, all of them shook their heads. None of them wanted to be mixed up in a plot like this. But in fact, there was one of them, a Brahmin named Yaja, and he agreed to help. So he, together with his assistants, prepared a ritual ground right there by the palace. And they lit many fires and made many offerings to those fires, for the fire is the mouth of the god. And they sang the old songs. But they mingled with these old songs spells of crow feathers in darkness, spells of broken mirrors and cracked plates, spells of revenge and betrayal and the dark water that slinks between the cracks in our questions. So they sang these bitter spells, and the smoke went up, and the gods heard. And on the afternoon of the 9th day, Yaja went to the king and the queen, and he said, "Now, my queen, it is necessary for you to eat this flower, and then you will conceive a child who will be a warrior boy, a warrior man someday, who will kill Drona." "If I am to be a part of this," said the queen, "then I must go ritually cleanse myself for this ritual." "All right then," said the king, "but hurry, for the sun is nearing the horizon, and soon the day will be over." "Yes," said Yaja, "and this must be completed on this day, or we will have to start this ritual all over again." So the queen went off into the palace, and she went down the hallways, and she went into her chambers, and there she slipped into the healing waters and took a bath. Now meanwhile, out in the ritual ground, the Brahmins chanted and sang. But as they did so, none of them could fail to notice the sun was nearing the horizon, getting closer and closer. So they sent a messenger into the palace, and he went and he knocked on the door of the queen's chamber and said, "My queen, the day is nearing its end. We need you to come back and eat this flower." And she said, "I am bathing in these waters. I am not to be disturbed. I will be finished soon, and I will come and I will eat that flower." So the messenger ran back, but they all could see the sun was getting closer and closer to the horizon. Still they chanted, still they sang. Finally, when the sun was about to touch the edge of the earth, the messenger ran back into the palace, down the hallways to the door of the queen's chamber, lifted his hand to knock on that door, and he saw that door was covered in the red light of sunset, falling through a diamond-shaped window in the wall. Indeed, the day was over. So he went back to the ritual ground there, and he told the Brahmins and the king the news. "Well, it's all over," said Yaja. "We must simply start all over again. Perhaps tomorrow. It'll take 9 days of chanting and spells to give us this opportunity once more." And the king scowled and went away. Well, the Brahmins began to clean up the ritual space there. And one of them, an assistant, took hold of that flower, and idly he simply threw it into the fire. Whew! And it went up into ash. And then he turned and took a step towards a large bowl of water, intending to use this bowl of water to put out the fire. But as he took a step towards the water, he heard behind him a sizzling sound. Footsteps in the grass, footsteps that were burning the grass to ash as they took their steps. He turned and he looked, and there was a man, a young man, a beautiful young man, with a blue jewel in the center of his forehead. And this young man said, "I am Drishtadyumna, born to kill Drona, my father's arch enemy." And the Brahmins praised him, and they wrapped him in a blanket, and they took him down to the holy river Ganges to be cleansed. Well, this particular assistant then turned back towards the bowl of water, to lift it up, to pick it up, and to put out the fire. But again, as he took a step towards the bowl of water, he heard behind him a sizzling step, and then another. And he turned, and there was a beautiful woman standing there with long, black, beautiful hair, and she looked at him with fire in her eyes, and she said, "I am Draupadi, the princess born from a fire. I was brought into this world to cleanse the earth of the warriors of this world, the Kshatriyas, the warriors who bring only fighting and death and danger to the world. Because of me, they shall be wiped from the face of the earth." And then she seemed to wake up as from a trance, and she said, "Where am I? Who?" And the Brahmins stepped towards her, and they wrapped her in a blanket, and they took her down to the holy river Ganges, where she was welcomed by many women, and she was cleansed and bathed in the holy waters of that river. So that's how Draupadi was born, and time went on, and the moon became fat and then thin again in the sky. And she grew older, but she'd been born fully grown, so she was pretty much ready to go. So it was only a few more years before she went to her father and said, "Father, it is time for me to seek a husband in this world, and here is how I would like it to be done. We will have a contest, yes, an archery contest. For the man I marry must have determination, must have strength, must have the skills of an archer, not only the physical skills, but the mental skills to focus on a goal and to accomplish it. Yes, this is what I desire. We will have an archery contest, and the one who wins that contest shall be my husband." So she said, so it was decided. And the word went out all through the kingdom. And people came from far and wide to compete in this contest, because Draupadi's beauty, her strength, and her courage, all of these things news of this had spread far and wide. And one of the men who came to compete in this contest was named Arjuna. And you should know, Arjuna, well, he's the son of Indra, the king of the gods. He is one of 5 brothers who are at the core of the story of the Mahabharata. These brothers are known as the Pandavas, the sons of Pandu. Arjuna was the lead warrior of these 5 brothers, and he came to compete in this contest. And they took a wooden fish and put it high up on a pole, and right before this wooden fish, also on a high pole, they put a red chariot wheel. And a boy would pull on a rope and set that chariot wheel whizzing around, and the task would be to shoot an arrow through the spokes of that chariot wheel and to hit the fish. And one young warrior after another would try to accomplish this feat, and each one would release his arrow and would go shooting through the air, but each time it would hit that chariot wheel, and just get caught up in it and shredded to pieces, and the shards of the broken arrow would fall down to the dusty yellow floor of the stadium. So it went, one after the other failing. But Arjuna went, and he looked, and he sighted through the blur of that chariot wheel, seeing the rhythm of this wheel whizzing through the air, and he let his arrow go. Shunk! It went right into the eye of the wooden fish on the other side. Ka-tang! Just like that. Aha! Everyone said, "We have a winner, we have a winner." And so he won the prize, which was Draupadi. She descended from the stands, and she took a garland of white flowers, and she put it around Arjuna's neck. And her father said, "Return in a month, and we shall have a wedding." So Arjuna went back home. He went back home to the city and the palace of Hastinapura. And when he got there, he was so excited. He got to the doorway of his mother's chamber, Kunti, his mother. And in the doorway, he said, "Mother, I've won a prize in a contest." And she said, "Whatever it is, you must share it with all of your brothers." But it's a woman." "Well, be that as it may, the gods slipped into my voice and to my mouth. You must share her with all of your brothers." Well, Arjuna wasn't so sure about this, but he went and told this news to all of his brothers, Yudhishthira, his brother, and Bhima, the strongest man in the world, and Nakula and Sahadeva. They were kind of mystified. How could they possibly share one woman between them? Well, they went and spoke to Bhishma, the grandfather of them all, though he has no children, but that's another story. But a wise man, very learned in the arts of the Vedas, those scriptures, those poems which are the soul of this world. And they said, "Bhishma, tell us, is there some law against this? Is it possible? What are we to do?" And he thought for a moment, and he said, "Well, often a man will have many wives, so I can see no reason why a single woman might have several husbands. And in fact, in the Vedas, in all the laws of our kingdom, there is nothing which says this is not allowed. So I think the real question is, do you all love Draupadi?" Now they had all seen her, for they had all gone to the contest with Arjuna. They all remembered her beauty and her strength and the fire in her eyes, and they all said as one, "Yes, we love Draupadi." So a messenger was sent from Hastinapura, across the wide lands, through the jungles, through the deserts, beside the rivers, and through the valleys. And at last this messenger came to the kingdom of Panchala, and to the yellow palace where Draupadi lived with her mother and father, the king and the queen. And this messenger entered the throne room, and knelt down on the blue hexagonal tiles of that throne room, and he said, "Princess Draupadi, you have been married not to one man, but to 5. And what do you think they said? Do you think her mother and father were like, "Oh, this is excellent. We love this. This is fantastic. What a deal." They didn't say anything of the kind. In fact, they said, "God, this is ridiculous. This is crazy. This is nuts. What do they think? No, no, no. This will be a disgrace. People will talk far and wide about my daughter." And Draupadi herself stamped her foot and said, "I chose Arjuna. I did not choose all of his brothers. Fetch the royal Brahmin. The royal Brahmin, perhaps you will find some law, some loophole, some way out of this deal." Well, the royal Brahmin came in his saffron robe, and he sat before them, and he was told about the situation. And he said, "Draupadi, someone very powerful has chosen this fate for you." "Yes, someone powerful, a man, most likely. These men, they always are deciding my fate, the fate of us women." "No, no, no," said the Brahmin. "In fact, the person, this powerful person who has chosen this path is you." "Me?" she said. "Yes, you have chosen this. Close your eyes, and you shall see." So she closed her eyes, and he reached out and he tapped her on the forehead. And in that moment, she had a vision. And she saw herself in a past life, in a marriage which was not very harmonious. And she saw herself one day walking from her house and from her village and up a tall, tall mountain. She felt again every step she took, up the rocky path, the sandy, dusty path up the side of this mountain. She felt again the cold winds blowing as she went higher and higher. She felt again what it was like to reach the very heights of this mountain where it was snowy and cold, and to sit down on a stone and to meditate. To breathe in and to breathe out, to meditate on Shiva. So she sat there, breathing in, breathing out, bringing stillness to her body and to her mind, focusing only on her breath, focusing only on Shiva. And at last, around her, she felt a red light, and she opened her eyes. And there in a ring of fire was the god Shiva, And he said, "My child, I am pleased with you. Each moment is a blossoming flower, and over you have taken these moments and placed them on my altar. So I am pleased with you. I wish to give you a gift. Tell me what it is you most desire." And Draupadi said, "Lord Shiva, I desire to find a husband who is kind and generous, who is strong and good-looking, who is a hard-working man, but a man who knows how to have fun as well and to laugh, a man who knows many jokes, a man who can cook well, but also knows how to fix things around the house, a wise man, an intelligent man, but practical as well, able to deal with money well, a good lover, of course. Did I mention that? A good lover. Someone who's a good family man, good with children, of course, with boys and with girls. Someone who's a man of the community, but also has his own sort of solace within, has his own quiet within, and is comfortable being alone. He can cook, as I said. He can fix things around the house. An adventurous man, but not a man who leaves too often. No, not at all. A man who knows how to clean, yes, when that is called for. And a man who appreciates beauty, yes, but doesn't go running around after other women at all. A man who's loyal and funny and curious and strong and beautiful and hardworking and thrifty as well and reverent before the gods and has a spiritual side. And so she went on, and then Shiva said, "My child, no human man can have all of these qualities." And Draupadi said, "Lord Shiva, I have meditated here for a long, long time. I have focused my mind on you. I have focused my thoughts on you. You have asked me what I desire, and I have told you." And Shiva said, "My child, you shall receive what you desire, but perhaps not in exactly the way you expect." And in a flash, Shiva was gone. Well, Draupadi did not feel any different. She began to walk down the mountain, not sure what all of this meant. And in the vision, she saw her become an old woman. She saw herself become an old woman, wrinkled and gray. She felt herself becoming ill, becoming sick. She felt those last moments of that past life, when her family took her and laid her down on the ground so that she would die in contact with the great mother, the great earth beneath our feet. And in those last moments, suddenly she had a vision of the future. And just before she died, she burst out laughing. So in the yellow palace there, with the Brahmin before her, with her father and mother there, Draupadi again burst out laughing, a wild, roaring laugh that filled the room. Outside, there were two women drawing water from a well, two servants. They heard this laughter, and they looked up at the window up there. And one of them said, "What do you think's going on up there?" And the other said, "I think the princess is very happy today." Well, you should know that time went on. Time went on as it does. And in time, Draupadi and her 5 husbands were driven away from their kingdom. Because Yudhishthira, the eldest of them, he lost the entire kingdom in a dice game. It was a rigged dice game with his cousins, but nevertheless, he lost everything. And they were sent to the forest to live for 12 years in exile. And during this time, we find Karna. During this time, we find Karna. Now, Karna is actually a brother to all of the Pandavas, though none of them know this. But that's another story. Karna one night was walking through the darkness of the palace of Hastinapura with a candle in his hands. And he went to Duryodhana. Now, Duryodhana is the head, the leader of the evil side of this conflict, though good and evil, you should know, will be mingled and woven together like 2 different colors in a tapestry. It will become hard to tell them apart. But for the moment, we're going to say that Duryodhana was evil, for he had done certain evil things, like make sure that that dice game was rigged. So Karna went to him, and he said, Duryodhana, my spies tell me that Arjuna has left the others. He has left them. They are all in the forest, but he has departed from the others. He has gone far into the mountains. What is he doing? Said Duryodhana. We must find out. We must know. Yes, said Karna. Let us go to the room of vision. So they walked through the dark palace, down the hallways. Down the hallways they went, until they came to the room of vision. A circular room. And at the door there was a Brahmin in an orange robe. He nodded and let them in. Now inside this circular room there was a fire, the smoke rising up through a hole in the ceiling to mingle with the lights of the stars far above. And there was a Brahmin there in an orange robe, and they sat down around this fire. This Brahmin had his eyes closed. They sat for some time in reverence. And then the Brahmin opened his eyes, and he said, You wish to see? You wish to see Arjuna on his journey. You wish to see him, to find him, and to find out what he is doing. Yes, said Duryodhana, that is what we seek. Look into the fire, said the Brahmin, and he cast golden brown, strangely angular leaves into that fire, and the smoke went up, smoke in many different colors. And they looked into that smoke, and there, in the gray shadows of that smoke, they saw a mountain, the snow-covered side of an immense mountain. And there on the side of this mountain there was a tiny speck, and it was moving. And they saw that it was a man. "Arjuna," said Karna. "Yes," said the Brahmin, "that is who you see." And they saw Arjuna climbing up this snow-covered mountain, higher and higher, with his bow and his arrows strapped to his back. They saw him arrive at the height of this mountain. They saw him sit down in meditation, amid the whirling snow and the blowing wind. They saw him still his body, his mind, and his thoughts, and to focus everything on Shiva, the god who dances this world into being, who holds in one hand a drum with which to begin the universe, and in another hand he holds a fire with which to destroy it. So he meditated on Shiva. And then suddenly he heard a grunt, and he opened his eyes, and there was a black boar running through the snow. Well, Arjuna, without a thought, took an arrow from his quiver, fitted it to his bow, and he let the arrow go. Shunk! It went right into the boar. The boar leapt once, twice, and crashed down dead into the snow. Arjuna got up. He went to that boar. He knelt down. He took hold of his arrow to remove it, for arrows are expensive and beautiful things. But as he did so, he saw there was another arrow in the boar. "What's this?" And suddenly there was a shadow over him. He looked, and there was a man dressed only in black rags. And he said, "This is my boar. I have killed this boar, Arjuna. Leave me my boar." "No," said Arjuna. No, I saw this boar, and I killed it with my arrow." "You did not," said the man. "You came second. I saw this boar, and I felled this boar. This boar is mine." "No," said Arjuna, "this is my boar, and if you so much as touch this boar, you shall have a fight on your hands." And the man said, "Do your worst, do all you can. This is my boar." Well, Arjuna was suddenly filled with rage, and he flung himself at this man with his sword, west, this way and that. But the man was nowhere to be found. It seemed everywhere the sword went, the man was no longer there. This was unheard of. Arjuna was a great warrior, trained for years. And the man said, "You cannot touch me. Look, I am wind, I am a feather. I am beyond you. You cannot find me anywhere." And Arjuna flung himself at the man, trying to kill him, to bring him down. But the man could not be touched, so it seemed. He danced around Arjuna, this way and that. And suddenly he reached for Arjuna, and he lifted him up like a leaf into the sky. "Look, you are nothing. You are empty. You are a doll. I play with you. You are a toy." And he whirled Arjuna around, and he touched his forehead, and he sucked all of his breath from his body. "Look, I take your life. You could die just like this. I could snap my fingers and break you like a dry twig." And he threw Arjuna down into the snow, just like that. And suddenly there was a ring of fire. And sitting, floating within this ring of fire, was Shiva. "Shiva," said Arjuna, forgive me for striking you. I did not know you were who you are. Forgive me, I was confused." And Shiva said, "My child, I am well pleased with you. I am pleased with you, Arjuna. I wish to give you a gift. Tell me what it is you desire." "Shiva," said Arjuna, "I desire Pashupata." "Pashupata," said Shiva, "a weapon that can destroy the world. You desire this weapon. Why is it, Arjuna, that you desire such a weapon?" "Because, Lord Shiva, I am destined to fight a great battle, and to win this battle, I need this weapon." "The mountains quiver when they hear of this weapon," said Shiva. "The rivers tremble in their beds. All of creation knows the sound of this weapon and fears it. Do you truly desire this weapon, Arjuna?" "Lord Shiva, I do." "Arjuna, I give you this weapon." And Shiva reached out and touched Arjuna on the forehead, and he fell unconscious to the ground. The red flames around Shiva thumped and bristled for a moment, shining down on the snow, where Arjuna lay unconscious. And then Shiva vanished, and he was gone. Well, sometime later, Arjuna awoke. Was anything different? Did he feel different? There was a strange melody in his head, a strange rhythm, a rhythm like the earth itself and like the undoing of the earth. He felt it thumping, ringing within him. But besides that, the world did not seem different. So he began to walk down the side of that mountain. And then he found shelter in a cave, and there he slept for the night. But in the morning, he was awoken by a bright light at the door of the cave. He staggered, stumbling forward, covering his eyes, looking at this light, and this light was not the sun. For in fact, Indra, the king of the gods, was there, in his chariot of golden flowing fire. And he stretched out his hand, and he said, "Arjuna, my son, I have heard that you have received Pashupata, a weapon that can destroy the world. But it is not enough to possess this weapon. You must learn how to use it, how to deploy this weapon, and how to call it back. Come with me to my realm, and I will teach you how to use this weapon." So Arjuna took Indra's hand and stepped into his chariot. And the two of them ascended, past the clouds and the moon and the stars, into Indra's world. And Arjuna spent 5 years in that world, surrounded by golden light, learning from Indra. And Indra taught him how to deploy this weapon and how to call it back, all the intricacies of its structure, the song at the heart of this weapon, the rhythm at the heart of that song. He taught all of this to Arjuna. And Arjuna stayed in the realm of Indra for 5 years. Meanwhile, all of Arjuna's brothers, together with the princess Draupadi, were living deep in the forest on the shore of a beautiful lake. And one day, Krishna came to them. Krishna, who is Vishnu, the preserver, the god who preserves all things, taken form as a human man down on this earth to preserve the world for a little while. When things get out of balance, when things are out of whack, so we might say. So Krishna comes down to earth, and so Krishna was there, and he walked through the forest, and they saw him coming. And Yudhishthira, the eldest, stood up. "Ah, Krishna, you have come. So good to see you." "Yes," said Krishna, "yes, I have come. I bring news." And he sat down with all of them, and he said, "Arjuna, your brother, has obtained Pashupata from Shiva, a weapon that can destroy the world. And what's more, Karna has gone deep into the desert, seeking for himself such a weapon, and it is very possible that he will find such a weapon." And Yudhishthira said, "These weapons are horrible things. They can destroy the entire world. Krishna, tell me, if it comes to a great battle, if a great war is fought, will the earth itself survive?" And Krishna said, "I do not know. But I can tell you this. Once long ago, or else far in the future, there was nothing at all. Once there was nothing at all, nothing but ash and dust and smoke and thunderous clouds. The world was completely without form. It was empty, destroyed, and there was one man named Markandeya who crawled through this landscape, crawled on his hands and knees, his hands and his knees caked with the dirt and the dust and the ashes, and he knew that this dust was the dust of cities. It was the bones of humans, men and women and animals. It was the dust of great forests that had been burned and pulverized and destroyed over many years. This was all that was left. He was not sure why he was alive. He was not sure how. But meditating on his own breath, staying focused, he crawled across this bitter landscape of thunder and death and ash and dust. But after a while, he looked and he saw a fig tree. It was so beautiful, so resplendent, it seemed to be glowing, a beautiful fig tree. And at the base of this tree there was a boy. Markandeya crawled towards this boy. He looked up at him. Suddenly the boy seemed immensely tall. "What?" he said. "How?" And the boy looked down at him and smiled. And then the boy opened his mouth, and he breathed in, and a great wind began to shift and shiver through the world, and it took hold of Markandeya like a fist of air, and it lifted him up, and the boy was suddenly gigantic. It lifted him up past his knees, past his hips, up past his chest, towards his mouth, and he went into his mouth, into the black funnel, and was dragged down, shoomp, and he landed in green grass. He heard birds singing. He opened his eyes. The sky was blue. There were white clouds floating there. He heard laughter nearby, the laughter of children. He sat up. He was in a garden. There was a house nearby and a village. There was a flowing stream. There were mountains far off. There were birds singing. Amazed, astounded by the fact that there could be anything at all, he stood up and walked through that village. He saw chickens squawking. He saw an old woman dealing out cards on a table for a young man. He saw farmers selling their fruits and their vegetables. He saw someone else selling carpets. There was a man singing an old story. He was playing an instrument with 3 strings, and a buzzing sound came from it, and he sang an old, beautiful story. He walked to the edge of the village. There was a stream. There were women washing their clothes in the stream. So he walked around this village astounded, and he lived in this village for some time. And eventually he fell in love with a woman he met by the village well. And in time they had 7 children. And these children grew up and had families of their own. And one day when Markandeya was quite old, he decided to go on a voyage to see the world. So he left his family and voyaged across the world, riding on horses, in wagons, every which way he could. He came to the sea. He rowed in a boat across the sea. He saw amazing silver and green fish. He saw islands filled with beautiful snakes, resplendent with golden skins. He went high into the mountains. He saw bears. He went to cabins and huts in the mountains. He heard stories that no one had heard before about the mirror world at the root of this one, about the joys that come from apples and the wedding of the couple who live inside the apple seed. He voyaged through the universe. He saw white horses. He went to weddings. He went to funerals. He saw great festivals and parades. He saw beautiful fires burning in the night and people dancing around them. He saw many things. And eventually he returned to his village and to his house and to his dear wife. She was elderly as well, and she embraced him, and they spoke words of love. And soon it was his birthday, and they had a celebration. And all of his 7 children came, and all their families. And there was much singing and laughing and telling of stories, and there was delicious food. And in the middle of this celebration, Markandeya thought to himself, I would love to eat a mango right now. Yes, a ripe mango. Now there was a ripe mango outside, in fact, in the mango tree in his garden. So he excused himself. He left the house. He walked through his garden, and he walked towards the mango tree. And as he reached his hand out to grasp one of these beautiful, luscious, delicious mangoes that had within it all the colors of the sun set over the far distant golden desert, as he reached out, a wind stirred up and blew this way and that, and shivered through the leaves of the tree. And this wind grew in power, and like a fist of air it took hold of him and whirled him up higher and higher into the sky. No, he said, no. He looked down. There was his house getting smaller and smaller, the world sinking away like water draining away from a well. Up higher and higher he went, in towards a dark cloud, a dark funnel of strength. He went into it, shoom, he went through this tunnel, landed down in a world of ash and dust. Whump, just like that. And he looked up. And there was the fig tree, and there was the boy, immensely tall, the boy looking down at him, his eyes shining. And the boy looked at him and said, "How did you sleep?" "So, Yudhishthira," said Krishna, "that is the story I have to tell you. That is what I know." "But what am I to do?" said Yudhishthira. "How am I to live? What decisions am I to make? Should I go forward with a war if it comes to it? Should I fight such a battle?" And Krishna said, "Look at the swans out there on this lake." They all turned. It was true. There were white, beautiful swans on the lake, floating there. "Look at those swans," said Krishna. "Look how beautiful they are. Some say that in a past life they were Brahmins, and they have come back as swans. They are beautiful, yet still the mouth, the beak of a swan is so powerful, it can break a man's finger into 2 pieces. Still, look at them. Look at how beautiful the swans are." A princess stepping out of a fire. A man crawling across a wasteland of ash and dust. A princess, that same princess, meditating on the top of a mountain and suddenly bursting out laughing. Arjuna meditating in the snow, and Shiva comes in his ring of fire. These images have a life in these stories, and the story is like a river flowing. It moves through time. But the images are also moments you can hold in yourself. You can return to. You can step back into these rivers of narrative and see what is there. And perhaps it will be different another day, another night, another time. Thank you for listening to this story. I'm leaving my window open. There's a few crickets out there, maybe some traffic noise. Not sure if you're getting that or not, but why not leave the window open? Like leaving your mind open to thoughts. And if we get the thought of a barking dog or a drunken man, well, that's part of the ride. These stories, this is sort of a brief intro to the Mahabharata. I have told these stories in more detail elsewhere. You can find them on my website, on the podcast. I've developed them more fully. But I wanted to present these here together just because they felt right. And as often, these stories, well, they're like dreams. And the dreamer is perhaps the earth. The dreamer is a culture and a place, India being that culture, that place. And the dreamer is perhaps inside of us. Perhaps we are ruminating on these things. And what is this dreamer considering? Well, this dream is of the end of the world, and it's where this princess comes from, the question of where she comes from, and this dealing with the end of all things and the beginning of certain things. The fire in these rituals early on, that's quite a symbol, and you see that in early Vedic culture is the fire as the mouth of the god, and you make offerings to that fire. And there's a story of a king, King Mathara, who never speaks, for he has Agni in his mouth. He has fire in his mouth. Agni of all men, it is called, that form of Agni which all living beings keep inside themselves. That's a quote. This is a story I found in the book Ardor by Roberto Calasso. So a king never speaks because he's got fire within him. And there's a Brahmin who provokes him with questions. And none of these questions gets the king to speak until finally he asks him a question, and he involves ghee in that question, ghee, which is clarified butter. And at this point, the fire jumps out of his mouth because Agni loves ghee, loves the fat. And the king and the Brahmin then follow the path of the fire once it leaps out of the king's mouth eastward, and civilization begins. What a wild, crazy story. Interesting. A king with fire in his mouth. He won't speak. The Brahmin, bugs him with questions, finally gives him a question with ghee in it. He must mention clarified butter, fat in some way. The fire leaps out, and then the Brahmin and the king follow it, and civilization begins. It's such a strange story, but I can't get it out of my head either. Something beautiful and horrible about civilization beginning in this way, this fire leaping across the world. Who wants to burn the world down? Well, none of us really, but we do. We drive our cars. We buy our food, trucked here, sent here by plane from far away. That is civilization, perhaps. Well, who am I to say? Anyway, the fire in this culture, which is the Vedic culture way back when, has a very powerful role in ritual and in a way to give to the gods. And so Draupadi steps out of this fire, and she will prove herself to be a very fiery princess throughout this story. It's really wonderful. The Mahabharata dates from roughly 500 BCE to 500 CE or AD. It's really a library of stories written down over about 1,000 years. All of them just, combined with, mingled with this overarching narrative. So it's similar to, in some ways, to 1001 Nights in the diversity of its stories. Yet, unlike 1001 Nights, it has a overarching sort of spine or backbone. It has an arc which proceeds from the beginning to the end. The Arabian Nights does somewhat, but the Mahabharata even more. And basically, if I can boil it all down, it's the story of 5 brothers and their one wife, Draupadi, and they compete with their cousins for a kingdom. They have a dice game that is rigged. They lose that dice game and go into the forest for 12 years to live in exile. They return, fight a war, win the war, and eventually go on to the other world. That's it in a nutshell. So you have these stories from the more or less middle of this great, fabulous epic, and I wanted to bring them to you. And what's interesting about this epic is it is a living tradition. It's just fantastic. Now, I haven't been to India. I've been to Bali briefly, but haven't been to India. But these stories are very much alive. They were alive there in Bali when I visited years ago, 2007, I guess it was. So the Odyssey, the Iliad, amazing, fantastic stories. And there are people who worship Athena or Poseidon or Artemis today, but not a lot compared to the epics of India, which is a living mythology, a living sacred vision of the world. And millions of people worship Shiva, for example, or Vishnu. Broadly speaking, the Hindu worldview has 3 main gods, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, Shiva, the destroyer. But that's a pretty brutal summary because, in fact, all three of those gods have a very multifarious, multiform nature. They have so many parts of themselves. Shiva does much more than just destroy. Same with Brahma, same with Vishnu. And also there's so many other gods, just millions of them it seems. And there's local traditions which worship particular gods. Again, I'm getting this from books and from talking to people from India, not from actually being there, but that's my understanding as a European American descended person, just to put a name on it there. That's who you're talking to. So the story of the Mahabharata has an overarching structure which is preserved by the Brahmins, basically, but it also has sort of village stories in it. The story of Draupadi laughing on the mountain, the story of Draupadi asking for all these qualities in her next husband, that is a village story. It's not found in the official version of the Mahabharata, which was compiled back in like the 1940s, 50s, I believe, where they took every version they could find and they just compiled them, and the versions of a particular incident in the story, which they found the most of, they made canonical. This is the real story. But there are variations on all of those. And I love this particular story where she asks for so much and has such a beautifully human way of asking all of these things from Shiva. Because we ask, because I ask, because we want a lot sometimes. And it gets us, well, if not into trouble, it gets us into situations that we would not have gotten into otherwise, which are perhaps surprising. The more traditional explanation of the fact that Draupadi has 5 husbands sees all of them as incarnations of gods who have, by necessity, been incarnated on the earth. That's one. There's several explanations. So I just love her laughter. It's a beautiful, fantastic, liberating thing. And then we get this story of Markandeya, crawling through this wasteland, which is a story I find just tremendously reassuring in this world of apocalypse that we are more and more living in, with climate chaos happening and more of it to come, with war and death around us. There's this vision which holds 2 things at once. The world will be destroyed. The world will be reduced to nothing but ash and dirt and dust. And the world will survive, and the world will be preserved. It's great. That's what myth does. Myth gives us these things beyond rationality. The logical mind is like, what do you mean? The world is either destroyed or it's not. Well, this story says the world is destroyed and it is preserved. The world is destroyed and it is preserved. So live with that for a while. Walk around the block with that for a while. That's what I aspire to do. And I find it tremendously reassuring, that vision. And finally, I just want to leave you with this. The visible acts on the invisible acts on the visible. The unseen world and the seen world are in relationship, and each one acts on the other. Each one changes the other. It's a remarkable vision. We see it in mythologies and stories around the world. But it is something expressed in the Vedas, the very ancient texts from India. And we see it in the story as well. The actions of the human characters in this story change what happens in the world of the gods, and vice versa. They are in constant interrelationship, which is just a beautiful thing and feels true to me. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are more stories, especially the Mahabharata, on my website, which is jayleeming.com, JAYLEEMING.com. And if you're able to support this podcast, please do so. that would be awesome. It's what keeps this thing going. You can do that on patreon.com, patreon.com/StoryJL. That's grain for the horse, That's popcorn for the village that makes people laugh and sing. That is sunlight for the tree of story, which is glad to have that sunlight and sucks it down with the rain, drinks it down, and then flourishes. And every leaf of that tree is a story. And I wish for that tree to flourish. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, please consider supporting it through Patreon, which also gets you free admission to online storytelling thingamajiggers that I do now and again and will do soon. Thank you for listening to this. May these stories live in you and around you in a nourishing way. Thank you for listening, and take care.